Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I obviously believe there's a lot of hypocrisy surrounding the support of daily fantasy sports compared to traditional sports betting. And the daily fantasy sports industry has been arguing that daily fantasy sports is somehow completely separate from sports betting, despite the fact that similarities can't be denied. And the same is true of the professional sports leagues. At the same time that they're embracing daily fantasy sports, they're banding together to prevent New Jersey from allowing sports betting, claiming they're trying to protect the integrity of professional sports. You know, it's going to get involved in organized crime and all illegal stuff. So sports betting, as has been mentioned, is legal in some states and in many other countries, including Canada, and the sports world is not falling apart. My questions are mostly for you, Mr. Jeanette. You said in your testimony that Canada has had legal betting since the early 90s. Is sports betting in Canada limited to betting on Canadian sports, or do Canadians legally bet on American sports as well?
Thank you. In Canada, you can bet on any sport in any country, and even in certain jurisdictions, as the sports have continued to gain sophistication, the offerings have begun to gain sophistication as well.
Well, so Mike, I'm just going to interrupt because I got to get through this. Have you heard of any major game-fixing scandals linked to sports betting in American sports since sports betting was legalized in Canada?
Not to my knowledge.
So there haven't been any major scandals. We also know that illegal sports betting market in the U.S., you mentioned, is estimated to be as high as $400 billion. So the integrity of the game argument just doesn't make sense to me. In fact, legalizing sports betting would simply allow for the same kinds of consumer protections that we're discussing today for daily fantasy sports. So my question is, would you like to comment on how bringing the current black market, organized crime, mob, whatever, doing all this sports betting, if you bring it out into the sunshine and make it legal, how could you ensure integrity?
Well, regulation just in general brings an environment of accountability, integrity, and consumer trust. Prohibiting does not do that. It drives an acceptable activity, traditionally drives it underground, where you have no integrity in the game, and therefore the people involved are not accountable to anybody, and the consumer's interests are not maintained. So I think that when you take a look at examples of how it has been done in other jurisdictions, even in Nevada, sports betting has been done legally and responsibly in other jurisdictions. And as you said, the world does not come crashing down around it.
Kind of like prohibition of alcohol, I would think. If sports betting were not legalized, do you see a way to stop the practice from occurring illegally?
I don't see how you can prevent something that is an industry of this size and this magnitude that exists today.
All right. Now, let me go to the Fantasy Sports Trade Association, Mr. Schenk, if I can. I know you said that you can comprehensively answer any questions about the industry because even though FanDuels and DraftKings are not here, that I'm going to ask you the questions that they would normally be here to answer. Last year, DraftKings applied and received a gambling license in the United Kingdom. FanDuel also applied for a gambling license, I stress gambling license, in the UK, but hasn't yet received it, to my knowledge. Yet in the U.S., both companies maintain that daily fantasy sports is not gambling. So what is DraftKings' rationale for getting a gambling license in the UK if they say that daily fantasy sports is not gambling? And what about FanDuel's? How do they justify this when they ask for the gambling license in the UK?
The laws of the United States are very different than the laws of the United Kingdom. In the United Kingdom, any game that has any skill is also under gambling. In America, in most states, if a game has more skill than luck, it's not considered gambling. That's why fantasy sports for over 20 years as an enterprise has never been considered gambling. We didn't have didn't meet for Congress or the state levels, but that's been called into question in the last.
But I mean, they're doing the same thing, right, in both places.
Well, I think that the laws are different. It's a different country here.
Well, it sounds like
states,
in one
if you
place,
have more skill than luck. It's considered.
I mean, they're not really doing anything differently. You're not telling me that, right?
Well, it's the same game, definitely.
Okay,
but the
that's
laws
all
of the
I'm
countries are
asking.
different.
It sounds like the difference is that in one country they have a lot of smart lawyers or lobbyists that are, defining things in one way, and in the other they're not. But the game is the same, correct? The game is the same.
It's still a game that has far more skill than luck.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.